Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joshsnipes, and if you're just checking the channel for the first time, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. If you're into map guides, operator guides, tips and tricks, videos like this one, we put these out all the time. I try to do this for you guys to give back to you because the support you guys have been giving me is absolutely insane. I wouldn't be here and wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. But without further ado, let's hop right into today's video. Let's give it a little discussion and let's see what we got prepared for today. Today we're going to be talking about how to play a roamer. Now we're going to be going over what a roamer is, the different kinds of roaming, some operators that I think are really ideal for roaming, and then some tips and tricks for you, whether you're doing a deep roam or shallow roam. We're going to dive into all of that in today's video, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get this started. So first off, let's define what deep roaming and shallow roaming / lurking really are. Now, I've heard lurking and shallow roaming used sort of synonymously, but I'm sure if it's not the exact same thing, someone will correct us down below. But for now, lurking, shallow roaming, I'm going to count it as the same thing. But basically what shallow roaming is, you're normally one doorway, one tiny sprint away from the site. So if you think on a map like Consulate, you might be playing in bathroom, you might be playing top of yellow stairs, or maybe even holding an admin when you're playing on the top floor defense. That is typically considered a lurk or a shallow roam because you have quick, easy access back into the site, and there's a good chance that you probably don't have to worry about too much enemy presence or anything like that while you're trying to get back into sight. Now, deep roaming, that's where things get a little bit complicated. Deep roaming is typically where you're going to either be below or above a site or even clear across the map. Some maps aren't as big, so you don't get that opportunity, but you think on a map like Theme Park, you might actually be able to be really far away from the site and not have super easy access to get back. So I just want to clear that up really quickly, what the difference is, so that way we have somewhere to start with as we go on with the video. Now you're probably wondering, what is the goal of a roamer? What is the objective of a roamer? I've never roamed before, so what exactly am I supposed to do when I get this role? And there's 4 things that I want to go over that I think are very important, but the first one being the main objective, and that is to waste as much time as humanly possible. Not only are you going to waste time, you're actually going to waste their resources also. And that is the key part of being a roamer, is wasting time. I'd say if you can waste anywhere from 1:30 to 2 minutes, even into 2 minutes 30, that's a great job on your part, and I feel like you've done your job. But if you can actually waste some resources too, maybe they use an Ash charge, Zofia charge, try to open up some hard breach walls. Those are some great things too, because you're making them waste everything that they have on you and all their time on you. Getting rid of drones is also a great option when you're trying to waste resources. Now, the second one being, typically you're going to be the first line of defense, so that means you're going to come in contact with the enemy first. And that leads me to my third point, is that your point is to stay alive. You're not supposed to die right away. If you go for a 50-50 gunfight, you're going to end up losing that half the time. And the thing is, sometimes you don't have all of the intel. And if you don't have all the intel and you can't make a smart play, you're going to end up getting killed so early on that you had no effect on the round. And the problem with this is that if you play too aggressive, let's say you go and you hear one person on the other side of a doorway and you go to swing it, you go to peek it, you might not see or hear the second, third, fourth person that's been watching that doorway for their teammate because of the fact that other teammate was too far away, so you didn't hear them. And this can end up losing a gunfight, say 9 times out of 10, because you're not going to see the second person who is aiming at the doorway. You're only going to see the person you were trying to swing on. Now, the fourth thing that I want to talk about is you want to try and trade at least one person out. You really want to try and trade someone, because if you can at least, waste a ton of time, waste a ton of resources, and then at the end you end up dying, but you're able to at least get one person out, that's a great job as a roamer. I'd say that's probably an A+ work if you can do all of that. Now, sometimes you're not able to do all of that, but at the very least, if you can trade someone out and waste some amount of time, that's a pretty good job. But overall, the main goal is to waste a lot of time, waste resources, and to trade someone out, or maybe even 2 people out if you end up getting lucky. So let's talk about what are some ideal operators for roaming. Again, 3-speed, 2-speed, usually any of those can be sort of ideal for roaming. I don't think there's any 1-speeds that will actually be useful for roaming. You might be able to use Doc or Rook to peek, but they're not usually going to be roaming, except if there's a specific setup that a team is using. But let's not get into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about some of my ideal operators for roaming. The first one, and I feel like the most obvious one, is going to be Vigil. Vigil can't be seen on drones if you use his ability. He has impacts and a pretty good SMG as his primary, and you have a machine pistol, or you have a pretty much secondary SMG as his secondary. Now, Jaeger is going to be the second one. Jaeger obviously has his ADSs to stop grenades. You're going to have to do a lot of setup. I feel like Jaeger takes forever to set everything up, his ADSs, his reinforcements, get his equipment down, and finally get into position. So this one, you might have to prepare ahead of time and think about what you're actually going to do. Mozzie's another good roamer. He did lose his super shotty, so not as useful as a roamer as he used to be, but I feel like his pests really still help out in terms of being able to take someone's drone or being able to stop someone from droning. These are some big key things you have when you're roaming. Now, Pulse and Valkyrie are two very good intel ops and both have C4s, which are really useful when you're playing below a site. Get that C4 off and maybe stop that plant from going down. Oryx and Alibi are two roamers that I feel like have been purely created from the standpoint that, hey, we need roamers and they need to just be fast and do exactly what they're supposed to do when they're roaming. Oryx, especially since he can go up hatches, he can dash through walls, and can basically run around the map a lot faster than the average roamer could. But Alibi, she obviously has her 3 holograms that you can place in front of windows, doorways, trick enemies. Any which way you really use her is going to be useful. Just depends on the team. I do feel like she's map dependent though. You know, on some maps she's not as useful when you have to bring a ton of utility versus other maps where it's just pure fragging like Coastline. She might be a little bit more useful there. Now, the last one, Cav. You're never going to see Cav in higher ranks because most teams drone, but I feel like in lower ranks, in uncoordinated stacks, when you're playing against uncoordinated stacks at least, you're going to have a lot of success with Cav because you're probably going to get an interrogation of every once in a while. But I would not really use Cav. I just put her on this list because I do feel like she's not really anything else besides an actual dedicated roamer. Now, I know what you're thinking, Ella wasn't on this list. The only reason I didn't put Ella on this list is because I feel like she really struggles at shooting at a distance. The rest of these operators are at least manageable, if not pretty good at shooting at a distance. Ella, on the other hand, her gun, the recoil on it, I just feel like for the average player, it's just too hard. And I also feel like her gun up close is really, really good. And guess where you end up shooting people? Up close, in sight, and anchoring on sight. Again, a lot of these ops really dependent on your play style and how you play, and you could technically speaking use any op to roam, but these are just some of the examples that I came up with off the top of my head. Next, let's hop into the tips and tricks. I'm going to do a general tips and tricks, shallow roaming, deep roaming, and then at the very end, we're going to be doing what people do wrong and just things that you should look out for. The first tip is make sure you don't roam alone. There is power in numbers. You actually have a way better chance at living for both you and someone else if you guys are both playing together and actually roaming together. Plus, that other person can cover your 6 when you're watching one angle. They can hold behind you, or they can at least hold one room away, so you cover more ground with a little bit less people instead of having your whole team there, just 1 or 2 people there. That way you can actually hold down above, below a site, or maybe right next to a site if you end up doing a little bit more lurking. Now, one of the things I also want to point out, if you are shallow roaming, make sure you're aware of some possible cutoffs, especially if there's anything that from in between you getting into a doorway that goes into site, or maybe you're hopping from site to site, maybe trying to get to somewhere else special. You want to pay attention to what are some possible cutoffs, especially if you think a map like Consulate, where there's a lot of windows on sides of buildings and people are hanging, rappelling, and they're actually going to shoot you as you try to get back into one of the sites. These are things you want to be aware of. This is why intel is very useful when you're playing, and that way if you have teammates that are anchoring on site, try to communicate with them, have them tell you what windows are open, what routes are safe to get back into site. Now, another deep roaming tip, if you actually go below a site, bring a C4. If you're playing Valkyrie, playing Pulse, maybe you're a mute that drops late into the round, you're trying to get that kill right before the plant goes down. These are some key things, and playing a C4 down below is a very deadly combination when you are actually using intel to give yourself an upper hand on the attacking team, especially if you're able to be a roamer properly. Let's say you waste a ton of time, they never end up clearing you out, or you somehow get back into sight and then drop at the last second to C4 from below. You're going to do a really good job when you end that round because the attackers can't plan the diffuser. Another thing is hold above or below a site to prevent a buck or a sledge from opening the floors or the ceilings. You think a map like Chalet, where you have the master bedroom, you have the main garage. Either way, if a buck goes downstairs or a buck or sledge goes upstairs, you're going to run into a lot of issues if you don't even bother contesting it. You end up getting cut off from a lot of the rotates. A lot of the floor ends up getting opened up. And because of all of the wood in trophy and the wood above dining and kitchen, you're not going to have very many safe places to actually sit. So if you have a roamer or two upstairs that can at least contest for long enough and make sure they can't get that hatch open, you're going to end up preventing them from getting into the site. Now, another thing that I want to point out, and this is more of a general tip, is that when you decide the room you want to roam in, honestly, don't pick a room that has one doorway in, one doorway out. If you do, and there's some way you can make a rotate, that is completely fine. But don't pick a room where if someone drones that out, you're stuck in there. An example of this would be Strip on Clubhouse. There's only one doorway in, even though you kind of have that wall that goes into the pool table. It's still not enough because you can get cut off so easily. There's no other rotation out of that room. Sure, maybe you might be able to hold it off long enough, but you're not going to get any sort of influence on the round if you just stay in that room the whole game. And that brings me into my last point. Don't stay in a room that's halfway across the map and hide under a desk and don't show yourself for 2 minutes or almost to the very end. You want to have some influence and be a nuisance to the attackers. You don't want to hide yourself away and not have any effect on what the attackers are doing with trying to get the site open and trying to actually get an execute down the site. You want to do something. So hiding in strip club, that's not going to be a good case for you and your team later down the line. Now, here's some things that people do wrong besides hiding by themselves. Not playing off a sound. If you're not playing off a sound and you're just assuming that as you run from room to room, that's clear, that's going to end up with you dead and the attackers being in a 5v4 or 5v3 advantage because you weren't paying attention and you weren't aware of how much time has passed. Always assume that the rooms you're entering probably has someone in it, especially if a minute and a half into a round, because most of the time, especially as you get up in the ranks, people will work on clearing and you will die if you're not paying attention. Also, another thing that I want to point out is that learn when to be aggressive. This is one of the things I feel like a lot of people get wrong because they play that roamer, they listen to what I said about not over peeking, and then they just sit in the corner and wait and wait. And wait, and then a stun grenade or yin candela or something comes in to where you can't see anymore, you're completely flashed. One of the key things, if you see a flashbang come in or you see a yin candela or even if you hear someone cook a grenade or anything like that, that's going to be your cue to go ahead and try to take the gunfight. Sometimes when you get trapped like a caged dog, you got to try to fight your way out or try to take someone down with you, because at the end of the day, if you can't see and you end up getting picked off super easy, that's on you, unless, of course, you had a teammate that just wasn't helping you or you had a teammate that wasn't saying anything. That's a different case. But if you can and you're going to get grenaded or you're going to get flashbanged or something like that, just try to take the fight. At that point, you're expendable because you know that you're going to die, but try to take someone down with you because hopefully, maybe you might get lucky and end up living through that gunfight or living through the gunfights that you might have with the multiple enemies on the other side. So I hope this was useful for you guys. Let me know if you have any tips for people who would like to roam, or if you are just getting into roaming and have questions, let me know down below, because that's the whole point of this video and whole point of this discussion here on the channel. But without further ado, that's going to wrap things up for today, and this is going to be Joshsnipes signing off.
Last two should be archive side, one open. Flanker, you're gonna want to come over here. Flanker, don't.
Oh! Bruh! Look at this, look at this.
Snaps on him.
By the way, Flanker.